A former PE teacher was jailed for 120 days and given an extended probationary period in the summer of 2016 after she pleaded guilty to 2 counts of having unlawful relations with a minor. The offences occurred between May and September of 2015 while Lindsay Himmelspach was employed at the Las Plumas High School in California. The 33-year-old had relations with 2 of her male students who were in their late teens, but under the legal age of consent. Himmelspach shared explicit videos with both boys and organized the trysts to take place away from the school to avoid discovery. The mother of one of the victims described Himmelspach as a predator and reported that her son had told her, "She was my teacher, Mum. What was I supposed to do?" Further court reports from the parents highlighted that the relationship with the teacher had left one of the victims showing signs of anger, depression, and self-harm. The prosecution stated that Himmelspach had abused her position of power and trust to manipulate the victims for her own gratification. After her sentence was handed out, a separate hearing on whether she would register as an offender was scheduled for a later date. Her defense maintained that the woman was remorseful and unlikely to reoffend, but the prosecution argued that the case displayed a pattern of events and was not an isolated act. Number 8. Anna Donelli. In late 2024, law enforcement in Italy carried out a series of raids that resulted in the arrest of 25 people suspected of being associated with the 'Ndrangheta mafia. Formed in the 19th century, it is regarded as one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. The 'Ndrangheta primarily dealt with drug trafficking but was known to also be involved in arms trafficking, racketeering, extortion, and money laundering, among other criminal activities. It historically influenced Italian politics at local and national levels and stretched its influence beyond the country's borders to other European countries as well as the Americas and Australia. In 2013 alone, the organization was believed to have made over $55 billion, and at one point its activities were believed to account at least 3% of Italy's GDP. Among those arrested during the December 2024 raid was Sister Anna Donelli, a volunteer at Milan's San Vittore prison. The 57-year-old nun was believed to have acted as a go-between for the organization and its jailed members. Donelli was known for her charity work in the crime and poverty-affected areas of Milan, and in February of 2024 she had received the Golden Panettone, an annual civic award. 2 politicians were also arrested and nearly $2 million were seized during the law enforcement operation, which expanded across several towns in the Lombardy and Veneto regions, as well as Calabria in the south. Number 7. Olga Bednarska. On October the 20th of 2024, influencer Olga Bednarska arrived at Manchester Airport from Phuket, Thailand, and was stopped by Border Force officials. The 27-year-old Poland-born model, whose social media visibility had increased following her appearance on the hit Netflix reality show Too Hot to Handle, was asked about the 2 large suitcases she had with her. Bednarska initially claimed that she'd packed them herself. However, when told to open them, she changed her story to say that she didn't have the code and that the suitcases had been given to her in Thailand. When asked who'd paid for her flights, Bednarska said that it was a friend named Tex, who wanted her to bring designer clothes and watches back to the UK. When the suitcases were eventually searched, the authorities found over 86 pounds of cannabis in vacuum-sealed bags hidden among the clothes. The drugs were worth over $200,000. Bednarska was arrested and made a full confession. She revealed that her trip to Thailand had been fully covered with spending money included, and that she'd been offered nearly $23,000 to take the suitcases, which she believed contained designer goods, back to the UK. The woman subsequently pleaded guilty to being concerned in the fraudulent evasion of a prohibition on the importation of a Class B drug. During her sentencing in late November of 2024, Judge John Potter told her, "You decided to place your trust in someone you hardly knew. You were acting under the direction of others, potentially for further profit." Bednarska, who lived in Manchester, had amassed debt of over $20,000 by living beyond her means to maintain her lavish, jet-setting influencer lifestyle. Potter also took her financial plight into consideration. The woman, who had no criminal priors, cried in court as she was spared from spending further time behind bars and given a 20-month sentence suspended for 2 years. Number 6. Shelby Cavignac and Alexa Wingerter. In early March of 2024, the Slidell Police Department in Louisiana began investigating Alexa Wingerter, a teacher at Slidell High School, following reports that she'd been having inappropriate relationships with her students. The 35-year-old had allegedly sent explicit photos and text messages to multiple male students. She was also accused of buying alcohol for students at a local bar and having a physical relationship with at least one 18-year-old boy who was in her class at the high school. Wingerter was arrested in April and charged with prohibited conduct between an educator and student, but the investigation into her activities continued into the summer. Law enforcement learned that she'd had additional illicit relationships with students who were not initially identified. Given the new evidence, Wingerter was rearrested in June on 2 more charges of prohibited conduct and indecent behavior with a juvenile. While looking into her affairs, investigators discovered that another teacher at Slidell High School, 31-year-old Shelby Cavignac, had been intimate with male youths in her class. She was arrested alongside Wingerter in June and charged with prohibited conduct between an educator and student. In the scandal's wake, one mother who chose to remain anonymous decided that her 2 children wouldn't be returning to Slidell High. She told Fox 8, "It's like, whoa, it's not safe at the school. So I had to pull them out because if not, I don't know what my kids would have turned into." The high school's principal didn't comment on the arrests. A teacher who didn't want to be identified told WDSU that Wingerter and Cavignac were good friends, adding that the school knew about their behavior. For years, multiple other teachers had reportedly complained to administrators, particularly about Wingerter, but the matter was swept under the rug due to the woman's alleged connections in the school and community. The teacher who'd come forward didn't clarify what said connections were. Both Wingerter and Cavignac were dismissed by the high school, and their cases were ongoing as of the latest updates. Number 5. Chantiel Cox. In February of 2016, 3 women were arrested in connection to a smuggling conspiracy carried out at the Nassau County Correctional Facility in East Meadow, New York. One of the arrestees, 25-year-old Chantiel Cox, had worked as a jailhouse nurse. On December the 23rd of 2015, she entered the facility carrying a lighter and a cell phone, items that were deemed contraband. The offenses were regarded as misdemeanors and Cox was administratively dismissed that same day. However, after an investigation lasting 6 weeks, the authorities learned that the woman had previously smuggled dangerous contraband into the correctional facility, including razors and the synthetic marijuana K2. Cox had conspired with 27-year-old Amanda Minier and Sharonda Hall, aged 24. The women had talked to inmates about bringing items into the prison. Minier and Hall received money through wire transfers and purchased the goods, which were then handed over to Cox. The woman then took advantage of her position as a nurse to bring them into the facility. The trio each faced felony and misdemeanor counts of promoting prison contraband as well as conspiracy charges. If convicted of the felony charge alone, they each faced 2 to 7 years behind bars. Number 4. Mario Fayjloun. In late September of 2024, a Greek Orthodox priest from Australia was handed an intensive corrections order at Liverpool local court after he was found guilty of 9 counts of aggravated touching. 36-year-old Mario George Fayjloun had befriended a family who attended his Greek Orthodox church in central Mangrove, north of Sydney. The priest was then reported to have cynically abused the trust he'd been given by the family by groping a woman and her 2 daughters. The incidents occurred during confession at the Central Mangrove Church and during dinner at the family's home in Bankstown between August of 2019 and February of 2020. The touching didn't involve violence or threats, but the victims were deemed inherently vulnerable due to their relationship with Fayjloun, whom they reportedly trusted and revered. The priest was accused of putting his hands on the woman's groin and breasts and forcing her to touch his manhood. He kissed her elder daughter on the lips and groped her inner thigh multiple times. Fayjloun also reached down the shirt of the woman's younger daughter, touching her breasts and back. The victims reported the incidents and the priest was arrested, but he denied the charges in December of 2021. Fayjloun claimed that the woman and her daughters had made up stories about him for financial gain. He was forced to resign from his position at the church but continued to provide religious services, such as confession, from his house. After he was convicted in the summer of 2024, Fayjloun was sentenced to 2 years behind bars and 300 hours of community service. Magistrate Gareth Christophe highlighted that the disgraced priest remained unremorseful in the trial's wake and told a media outlet, "This is not only delusion, but it also means there's no evidence of contrition or remorse. Repentance for Father Fayjloun is something for others to do, it would seem." Number 3. Mohammed Sarwar. Leading up to 2009, Mohammed Sarwar was regarded as a respectable IT teacher at the Burnage Media Arts College in Manchester, England. The 30-year-old father of one was, however, living a double life as a drug baron and masterminding a large-scale operation that trafficked cocaine and marijuana throughout Manchester. Sarwar, who was known as Bazza, or the teacher to his criminal affiliates, was placed under surveillance and the authorities bugged his car. He was eventually arrested following several failed attempts to smuggle drugs into the Forest Bank prison. In the first plot, Sarwar tried to get 88 grams of cannabis to Mark Hunt, a friend and fellow drug dealer serving a sentence at Forest Bank. Sarwar recruited Robert Hart, a prison officer on Hunt's wing, whom he paid £400 to smuggle the cannabis, but the man and the dealer were arrested before the drugs reached the prison. On the second attempt, the teacher supplied a small quantity of drugs to Nicola Whitehead, the girlfriend of Forest Bank inmate Andrew Harrison. The handover, which took place in the prison's parking lot, was monitored by undercover officers. Whitehead was arrested moments after passing drugs to Harrison through a kiss during visitation. Sarwar was taken into custody in 2009, and as he was awaiting trial for the cannabis offense, one of his dealers agreed to cooperate with law enforcement. Ben Davidson, who'd supplied the cannabis to prison officer Hart, revealed the wider-reaching conspiracy. The 24-year-old told the police that Sarwar had tasked him with transporting kilograms of high-purity cocaine to various gangs and that he routinely handled cash sums amounting to tens of thousands of pounds. While acting as a dealer for the teacher, he was supplied with rent money, a wage, a rental car and a work phone, which he was told to dispose of every 2 to 3 days. Sarwar reportedly had rules and tactics for avoiding law enforcement detection. His dealers were told to blend in, be discreet and always look presentable. They were not to use drugs themselves or register anything to their home address. If caught by the police, they were instructed to always say no comment. During the surveillance operation, Sarwar was recorded talking in detail about cocaine with one of his students, and he was later seen taking the boy to what the police suspected was a drug deal at a retail park in Salford. Sarwar controlled various properties, including a stash house in Wilmslow and a Stalybridge home which he supplied to Davidson. Police raids at the former address produced benzocaine, a cocaine cutting agent, while searches of the latter address resulted in the discovery of a hydraulic press contaminated with cocaine. By the spring of 2011, all of the various accomplices associated with Sarwar had pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply drugs. Sarwar, however, opted to go to trial, and in March of 2011 he was convicted of conspiracy to supply cannabis and cocaine. As the head of the crime, he was given the heaviest punishment of 21 years behind bars. A detective from the Excalibur organized crime unit, which had dismantled the drug operation, told the media that Sarwar had a duty of care to all his pupils to set them on the right path as they become adults. However, by masterminding a drug network, he abused his position and set the worst sort of example possible. Today's topic was requested by Lisa N2XT. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Katie Mehta. On November the 24th of 2018, Texas photographer Katie Mehta was hired to cover a wedding at Parker Manor in Weatherford. As reported by WFAA-TV and the Houston Chronicle, the 26-year-old got drunk during the reception. She was then found having intercourse with a male guest, which led to her being asked to leave the property. The photographer, who also worked as a swimsuit model under the name Max McIntyre, reportedly became enraged and fled the building after screaming at other guests. She didn't, however, clear the premises and was spotted behaving erratically near a fountain and urinating on a tree in the area. Deputies from the Parker County Sheriff's Office were called to the scene and took the woman into custody. While in the back seat of a patrol car, Mehta began threatening the deputies, telling them, Your families will be dead by Christmas. Y'all's daughters are dead. My dad is going to find out about this and y'all are dead. D-E-A-D. While she was processed at the local jail, a bottle of Xanax was found in the pocket of her jacket. Law enforcement believed that Mehta's unruly behavior stemmed from a combination of alcohol and the aforementioned prescription drug, which is used to treat anxiety and panic disorders. The woman was charged with felony obstruction and/or retaliation and public intoxication. In 2020, she was jailed for 60 days, given 18 months probation, and ordered to complete 100 hours of community service. Hang back after number 1 for our previous episode about when getting tricked goes wrong. That's coming up right after. Number 1. Dynus Saxon. On November the 10th of 2024, residents of an apartment building at 384 Grand Concourse in the Bronx, borough of New York City, called the authorities after hearing a struggle in the building's hallway. Responding NYPD officers found a bloodied man with cuts on his hands and feet and a knife lodged in his chest. The victim was identified as 35-year-old father of one, Kadeem Grant. He was rushed to a local hospital where he succumbed to his knife injuries. His killer was identified as Dynus Saxon, a successful male model who'd appeared in Vogue Italia, as well as ad campaigns for Levi's, Calvin Klein and JD Sports. The 20-year-old had recently shown up on the red carpet at the premiere of the Deadpool and Wolverine blockbuster. He was at one point represented by One Management, but his portfolio had been removed from the agency's website before the fatal stabbing. Saxon's mother reported that he hadn't worked in months, telling a media outlet, "I don't know what kind of situation he had got himself into." The woman, however, believed that her son had acted in self-defense, adding that he didn't just decide to murder somebody. The relationship between Grant and Saxon was unclear, as were the reason and circumstance behind the stabbing. Saxon was arrested on November the 11th and found to have a large bandage on his right hand due to an injury he'd sustained during the stabbing. He was held without bond and ordered to appear in court in December on charges of second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, and fourth-degree criminal possession of a weapon. In early 2023, 19-year-old Manuela Victoria de Araujo Farias packed her bags and flew from her home country of Brazil to the Bali International Airport in Indonesia. She would later reveal that she'd traveled to Southeast Asia in search of alternative methods of healing for her mother, who'd recently suffered a stroke. Farias had reportedly heard about temples in Indonesia where special prayers are made for the sick by Buddhist monks. However, before she could visit any temples or even leave the airport, the teen found herself in the custody of Indonesian law enforcement. Officials found over 6 pounds of cocaine in Farias's luggage and promptly arrested her for attempting to smuggle the drugs onto the island of Bali. Through her legal representation, the young woman maintained that she'd been tricked into smuggling the contraband by an alleged group of criminals from Santa Catarina, Brazil. Farias, described as a lingerie retailer, claimed that the smugglers had earned her trust by informing her of Indonesia's Buddhist temples before manipulating her into participating in the criminal scheme. The group had also allegedly promised to pay for surf lessons for the teen in exchange for her cooperation. Under Indonesia's harsh anti-drug laws, Farias could be sentenced to life in prison or death by firing squad if found guilty at trial. Number 5. Road rage in Missouri. On November the 20th of 2018, Missouri woman Elizabeth McKeon made her way to the bank in order to make a car payment before closing. She would later reveal that she was in a hurry, as she preferred not to be out of the house after dark. As the 49-year-old proceeded along the roadway in Springfield, she came up behind a vehicle at an intersection that was moving too slow for her liking. To confront the motorist ahead of her, later identified as 57-year-old Barbara Foster, McKeon purposefully rear-ended her. As Foster subsequently got out to assess the damage to her car, McKeon floored it and plowed directly into the defenseless woman. Foster was then dragged about 60 feet, roughly the length of a bowling lane, before McKeon crashed into another vehicle that was stopped in rush hour traffic. After being brought to a hospital, Foster was pronounced dead. Meanwhile, witnesses held McEwen at the scene until the arrival of law enforcement, at which point she was taken into custody. While speaking with detectives shortly after her arrest, McEwen admitted to tricking the victim into thinking she was going to be nice, only to run her over as soon as she exited her vehicle. Following Foster's death, her killer was charged with first-degree murder. In court, McKeown's defense acknowledged that she'd been under the influence of cough syrup at the time of her run-in with Foster. They contended that she was suffering from a rare liver condition which, in concert with the cough syrup, caused her to experience psychosis and hallucinations. Despite her attempts to mitigate her culpability in the matter, McEwen was ultimately found guilty in June of 2022. In September, she was consequently sentenced to life for murder plus 3 years for armed criminal action. Number 4. Don T. Huang and Siti Asia Kim Jong-nam, the eldest son of former North Korean leader Kim Jong-il and half-brother to Kim Jong-un, died after being exposed to an extremely toxic nerve agent at Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia on February the 13th of 2017. CCTV footage from the airport's departure lounge showed a pair of female suspects sneak up behind Kim and rubbed some sort of lotion on his face. As it would later emerge, the lotion contained a synthetic chemical compound called VX, which ultimately proved fatal for Kim about 15 minutes later. The two women were reportedly being watched by 4 North Korean men who swiftly boarded flights back to Pyongyang after the attack. While the 4 men were never arrested, it was theorized that they were serving as the female suspects' handlers, ensuring they carried out the deadly attack. The women, identified as Siti Aisyah from Indonesia and Don T. Huang from Vietnam, were arrested and charged with murder in the incident's wake. They told investigators that they'd been paid to participate in what they were told was a prank involving the wiping of baby lotion on unsuspecting travelers' faces. Aisyah and Huang had allegedly taken part in similar stunts at hotels and shopping malls. In the days leading up to Kim's death, the women had been approached about the pranks by an unidentified North Korean who claimed it was all for a reality TV series. It's been widely speculated that Aisyah and Huang's instructions had been handed down through the ranks of North Korean leadership and had originated with Kim Jong-un himself in an attempt to discreetly assassinate his half-brother. While the women's murder charges were eventually dropped, Huang did plead guilty to voluntarily causing harm by dangerous weapons or means, for which she received a prison sentence of 3 years and 4 months. Number 3. Abigail Finney. In December of 2018, Abigail Finney, a student at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, went public with a deeply disturbing experience she had while she was a freshman the previous year. The 20-year-old told BuzzFeed News that she fell asleep in her boyfriend's dorm one night. She was later awakened by the feeling of someone groping her from behind. Believing it was her partner, Finney proceeded to have intercourse with the individual without ever turning around to confirm his identity. The young woman subsequently went to the bathroom, but when she returned, she was horrified to find 19-year-old Donald Grant Ward, her partner's friend, lying in the bed. While speaking with the press, Finney said she could vividly remember the freaky expression on Ward's face, which sent her into a panic as she struggled to come to terms with the young man's pernicious deception. She went back to her room where she found her boyfriend asleep. After she woke him up and explained how his friend had tricked her into intercourse with him, Finney's boyfriend angrily confronted Ward before ultimately taking the matter to the police. During the ensuing investigation, Ward admitted that he believed Finney thought he was her boyfriend because of how intimately she interacted with him. In February of 2017, he was hit with criminal charges in connection with the incident. However, due to the vague language used to define consent under state law, prosecutors were unable to successfully portray Ward's heinous behavior as a criminal act, and he was therefore acquitted after 2 days of testimony and a few hours of deliberation. Finney, who was left with persistent anxiety and recurring nightmares as a consequence of her experience, expressed hope that her case might lead to a reform of what she described as the loophole in Indiana's assault legislation. Number 2. Poisoning in Utah. 43-year-old Ellie Weissman from South Salt Lake, Utah, attempted to murder her live-in boyfriend on April the 29th of 2019. The woman reportedly administered a spoonful of Drano crystals to her partner while he was very sleepy, then washed the poison down with a glass of water, tricking him into thinking it was his daily medicine. Wiseman later told law enforcement that she'd sought eternal sleep for the man after she'd felt too much hate earlier in the day, ultimately deciding that both of them were better off dead. In court records relating to the incident, it was revealed that after killing her boyfriend, Wiseman had planned to strip an electric cord and place the ends in some water, but ultimately opted not to go through with it. In fact, neither she nor her partner ended up dying that day. The man realized that she'd fed him Drano after finding the bottle on the floor, and although she waited about an hour, she eventually took him to an urgent care facility. The victim was said to have suffered severe damage to his esophagus, burns caused by caustic alkali, and acute respiratory failure. He required intubation due to the burning, bleeding, and swelling of his throat, but he ultimately survived. Wiseman was taken to the Salt Lake County Jail, where she was booked on charges of attempted murder and surreptitious administration of a certain substance. She was held in custody in lieu of a $100,000 bond. Number 1. The killing of Cynthia Hoffman. Cynthia Hoffman's family immediately knew something was wrong when she abruptly stopped answering her phone one day in June of 2019. The 19-year-old from Anchorage, Alaska, had reportedly overcome a learning disability to graduate from Service High School the previous year. On the weekend of her disappearance, Cynthia and her sisters had helped their father prepare a camper for an outing, for which the reward was supposed to be some cash and a trip to the mall. However, Cynthia never showed up to collect the money and was suddenly incommunicado. Her father drove through woods and bike paths looking for her all over town. To no avail. He got in contact with the police to report her missing and brought the situation to the local media in hopes that the public might help track Cynthia down. However, the following Tuesday, Cynthia's father received a visit from the police, who informed him that his teen daughter was dead. A homeless teenager by the name of Caden McIntosh was arrested on murder charges after confessing to bounding Cynthia with duct tape, shooting her in the head, and dumping her body into the river near Thunderbird Falls. 16-year-old McIntosh hadn't acted alone, however, as a young woman named Donelli was also mentioned in charging documents. Court records revealed that the pair lured Cynthia to Thunderbird Falls to go on a hike after a trip to the Mantanaska-Susitna borough. 19-year-old Caleb Leyland was also criminally charged for lending Bramer and McIntosh a car to carry out the murder. As law enforcement conducted their investigation, it ultimately emerged that Bramer had been tricked into orchestrating Cynthia's killing by a man named Darren Shillmiller, whom she'd met online. 21-year-old Shillmiller catfished Bramer, pretending to be a millionaire from Kansas named Tyler. He offered the teen $9 million to carry out the murder and sent him photographic evidence of its completion. After the details of Shillmiller's deception came to light, Bramer pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in February of 2023, with her sentencing scheduled for August. At the time of Bramer's deal with the prosecution, trial dates hadn't yet been set for Shillmiller, Leyland, or McIntosh. Thanks for watching. Would you spend a year with your favorite celebrity if it meant you'd have to spend it in a shared prison cell with them? Let us know in the comments section below.